so thriving is really based on taking on whatever comes in your life, not waiting for the good stuff, but whatever those difficult times, those good times, and stepping up from there. Go forward. The other piece that I think is crucial is when we're able to say, these are the things I can control. And I think you can control your aspirations, what you want to do in life, your dreams. We can control our attitude, how we decide we're going to keep trying and push through. And we can control our actions. I'm always looking for how am I working within that. And if I'm trying to control something outside of those three things, that's when I have to do a realignment and say, yeah, that's not my game. That's not what I can control. So I've got to push that to the side.
Welcome to yourbrilliance.com. I'm your host, Amy Waterman. And today our topic is how to thrive. Now, we all know how to survive. In fact, most of us are pretty good at it. We do what needs to be done. You know, we may not like it, but we suck it up. We put in our 9 to 5 and we pay our taxes and we don't get too crazy. But what does it mean to really thrive? To feel like your life is full of meaning and purpose? To wake up in the morning full of energy and raring to go, to know that you can cope with whatever life throws at you? Well, I don't know the answer, but I know someone who does. You're about to meet the world's first thriveologist, Dr. Lee Baucom. Dr. Baucom is the author of The Thrive Principles, 15 Strategies for Building Your Thriving Life. You can also catch his podcast on iTunes at Thrive Nation. You may also know him from his work at SaveTheMarriage.com, where his books, programs, and coaching helps couples build thriving marriages. In fact, I last interviewed Lee back in 2008 on the topic of great relationships, and I am thrilled to see that we've both grown in similar directions. Welcome back, Lee.
Thank you for having me, Amy. I'm excited to be here.
So I want to know, why did you make this shift from marriage repair to the science of thriving?
Actually, it wasn't a shift away from anything as much as that was what I was doing in the beginning. My whole thing was how to have a thriving marriage. The thing that happened was that we realized that a lot of people could use the same tactics and strategies that build a thriving marriage to make a marriage that's in trouble get to that thriving marriage. And so what I'm really doing is getting back to what I was doing originally and got diverted by Save the Marriage. And not to say diverted in a bad way. That's still, I love to help people build a thriving relationship. It's just getting back to my roots.
Wow. So this idea of thriveology, this is your invention. This is you're the pioneer of this. How did you come up with this idea then in the first place?
Yeah, so I didn't coin the term. I just grabbed the term. There was a term that Paul Pearsall used in a book about how to thrive, as this kind of his background. But he just said, somebody ought to create a curriculum for thriving and maybe a thriveology. And I went, thriveology, that's a perfect thing. So the reason I'm the world's first thriveologist is because I'm the one who said, hey, there's a thing called a thriveologist, and that's me. That's someone who studies how to thrive and figures out how to help people apply it. So that's my claim, that I didn't originate the term as much as I expanded upon the term that had just kind of dropped after it was said.
Yeah, I love Dr. Pearsall because he's the Hawaiian, isn't he? He's the Hawaiian. Yeah. Oh, yeah. His work is really good. His work on pleasure is also fantastic.
Exactly. Yep.
Yep. So when we think about being happy, we think about things like having no stress, not having to go to work, just everything goes our way. But in your book, you say that isn't what you mean by thriving. So what is thriving?
Well, okay, so let's go back to happy for a minute. Happy and happen share the same root. And so if you think about what that means is something has to happen to you in order for you to be happy. And so we're waiting for something out there to be right. And so you name some, I don't have to go to work today. That something happened to me. I don't have to go to work today. I win the lottery. I get a new car. I find this great new relationship. There's something external that has to happen in order for us to feel that happy. The problem is we're always waiting for the external. And so if the external doesn't happen, or we get used to it, then we're right back to the ground floor, the zero. I use the example because I recently had to get a new car. We get a new car. We're all excited about this new car. And about 3 or 4 weeks in, it's just the car. It's just the same thing. And so you don't get that excitement about going out and getting into the car that you've had now even for a month. And that's the external. So thriving is based on the fact that we don't have to wait for something out there. We can choose that at any point. It's also based on the fact that we can sometimes take the difficult points and allow those to be the springboards to something bigger. The challenges in our life are what really teach us how to take on the next challenge. And so you think about that stair step. What was hard today, you take on, and then you understand something different about yourself, and you take on the next challenge. And so thriving is really based on taking on whatever comes in your life, not waiting for the good stuff, but whatever those difficult times, those good times, and stepping up from there.
So what I'm really noticing the differences between what you said and like some of the stuff you see with the law of attraction, where, what is success? It's having everything you want. It's having all your dreams come true. It's having the car. It's having the job. It's having the spouse. It's having, the amazing lifestyle. This is what we are conditioned to think, that if we don't have that, well, we're not there yet.
Right.
And so what you're saying is that actually you can't tell whether a person's thriving based on any of the outside stuff. The only person who knows if you're thriving is you, because it's inside.
Yeah, so we do use those accounting things. We look for those points of success, and we can certainly say somebody is financially successful by what they have in their bank accounts, but that doesn't really tell us. I've met more miserable people who have way too many assets to know that that's not what's doing it. I had a guy, I talked about this story the other day with a client. He said, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know whether I can just keep living the lifestyle I've been living. I'm really feeling stretched. And I said, because I knew him, I was going, well, what's going on with your finances? He said, I only have $3 million in the bank. Oh. And I was going, really? You're stressed about only $3 million in your bank? and enough to know that it wasn't that. It wasn't the attainment. And so, if people use the law of attraction and they get good stuff in their life, I'm not opposed to that. It's just that if that doesn't happen, that doesn't mean you can't thrive. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing anything wrong. As far as I can tell in life, we have a beginning date and we have an end date, and there's no way to get ourselves out of that. We got that space in between to do what we want. And when we start doing those success pieces as whether we're happy or not, first, I know plenty who have hit success and aren't very happy. Second, it also denies the fact that we're all going to hit struggle points. And the question is how we understand the struggle points and how we move through them in a way. And so to use that same law of attraction, when people have struggle points, I've heard law of attraction people say, you need to stay away from that person. Something's wrong with them. They're getting the wrong stuff. And I'm sitting there going, but what are you going to do when it's you? What are you going to do when you get sick, or your loved one gets sick, or a business fails, or what are you going to do with those moments? And that's where I think that it really shows whether we're truly thriving or whether we're just chasing success.
That's fantastic. So of course, the next obvious question is, when you're struggling, how do you get through that struggle from a thriving standpoint as opposed to the normal standpoint, which is, it's not fair, and,
right.
Why don't things ever go my way, and just fighting it?
Yeah. So there are two, in my book, I have a number of principles. And so 15 principles to be specific, 15 strategies of how to build your thriving life. And there are two that I think fit very well together. One is acceptance, and the second one is responsibility. So acceptance is being able to say, this really is where things are. That this isn't fair piece, or why did this happen to me? As far as I can watch people doing that, it's usually them trying to find a way for it not to have happened. In fact, we'll just pull in that isn't fair piece. My book coming out in April is The Immutable Laws of Living. And one of the things I talk about is life isn't fair. Let's just acknowledge that. Life is not fair, and it's not meant to be fair. That's never been a part of the equation. Life isn't fair, but anybody who is able to watch this, to take advantage of your program, they've already won. They're already at the top of most of the population. So life isn't fair. you're right. You've already won it. And so let's get rid of the whole fair thing. Fairness is a concept we take from childhood. Um, we had this thing in my family that I think my parents would give us a treat. And my brother and I, we were closer in age. I've got a younger brother, but he was too young, so we took care of him. But my older brother and I had this rule that one person, well, my parents had the rule, one person would divide, the other would choose. And so we would chisel that cookie out so that there wasn't a crumb extra on either side. And then you're measuring carefully because you want it to be all fair. That's what we carry from our childhood into adulthood. And this belief that it should be fair, that I should get my fair share. There isn't such a thing. And so when we kind of give that up, then we can give up on that. Well, this just isn't fair. And then we have to step into the next piece. And that is to accept. So a lot of people, when I was a chaplain early in my career, a lot of people would say, why did this happen? And what they're really asking me is there a way that this could not have happened? Can we find an alternate reality? And that brings us to acceptance. And so a lot of times when I'm coaching people, they'll say, oh, you want me to give up? You want me to accept this and give up? And my response is, I want you to accept it so we now know where we're building from. We now have the ground floor, and we can move from there, which brings us to that whole responsibility piece. A responsibility gets really stuck in that blame game in our culture. And so when I say responsibility, I want to be very clear. I'm not saying who's to blame for this. I'm asking the question, how can you be able to respond to this? How do you make a choice in your response? So responsibility starts with asking a question, what can I control? And that gets us back to the things we can control. So that gives us a good start.
Yeah. So are those probably the most challenging Thrive principles? You've got 15. What do you think are the hardest ones for people to practice?
Yeah. So I think those two are very crucial, and a lot of the others kind of move around them and help strengthen them. They tend to be pretty hard. It's very hard to be able to say, okay, I accept where things are right now. And that tends to get us into trouble. I've talked with people who are underwater financially, and they keep going out and spending and, digging that hole deeper. And my response is, what are you doing? And they say, I don't want to look, don't show me the numbers. I don't want to think about that. And I say, we can't do anything until we start there. Let's accept where you are. Whatever has happened, that's back there. That brings you to that Thomas Leonard is a coach, and he talked about the perfect present. The perfect present doesn't mean our life is perfect as much as the perfect present moment represents exactly where we've been up until now. It brings us to this exact moment. Our decisions, the things we can't decide on, the outside influences all bring us to here. And now we've got to go from here. So that's the acceptance. It's really tough to do. Then choosing personal responsibility is the scary one, because now we are in charge. We can't say it's not my fault. I can blame my parents. It's up to me to decide how I want to respond differently.
Gosh, yeah, those are pretty difficult ones. So let's talk about how life feels when you've mastered the Thrive principles. So we've kind of been talking around thriving, and it's an inside thing. How will you feel? How will your life look when you're finally at the point where you can say, I'm thriving?
Let me tell you how it feels a little bit from my side when I'm in that zone. One of the things that happened, it's been a little over a decade now, is I got a diagnosis of an illness that the doctor said will eventually kill me. I would be disabled, and it was not a pretty path, and that didn't happen. And so when I got out of that, I realized I was in what I've started to call bonus time. It's the time I didn't think I would have, and so I wanted to be very clear about how I use that time. If I had bonus time, how would I best spend it? And so I decided my way of spending it, and you started with these two words, is about meaning and purpose. How am I going to make a difference in the world, an impact in the world, which suddenly turns it out to me saying, what do I do in the world? Not what am I going to get, but how am I going to use my gifts, my abilities, my talents, and do something that leaves an impact. So the first thing I always turn to is, where are you missing that meaning and purpose and impact? If you're feeling, and so the happiness we've already kind of pushed aside, but more joy and passion for what you're doing, that's a pretty good sign. Another good sign is when the hard times do come, you're asking the question, what's the lesson here? What can I take from this? Not what's the kind of the bad stuff. Sometimes we get stuck in that self-blame from the past, and we keep fixating on that old stuff. But what's the lesson I need to learn so that I can choose a different path? And that back to that responsibility. How can I respond differently as we go forward? The other piece that I think is crucial is when we're able to say, these are the things I can control. And I think you can control your aspirations, what you want to do in life, your dreams. We can control our attitude, how we decide we're going to keep trying and push through. And we can control our actions. I'm always looking for, how am I working within that? And if I'm trying to control something outside of those three things, that's when I have to do a realignment and say, yeah, that's not my game. That's not what I can control. So I've got to push that to the side.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about relationships too. So much is about trying to make the other person feel the way you want them to.
Yeah.
And, but that's not success. Success is knowing that you've done what you needed to do and whatever they choose is okay. That's acceptance, right? And
That's
personal
acceptance.
responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got a book coming out next year, The Immutable Laws of Living. Can you give us just a quick sneak preview of what that's going to be about?
Yeah. So I believe that there are some laws that surround us all the time, that if you don't know about them, you probably are pushing against them. And so you kind of, the comparison is kind of natural laws. You don't have to understand gravity for gravity to work. But if you try to defy gravity, you're probably going to lose that battle. And so the question is how you use gravity to work for you. And it's the same with these laws. Once you know them, then you can begin to let them go the right way. When it occurred to me was several years back. It was an early spring day. I'd mowed the lawn for the first time, and I was exhausted and hot and sweaty. It was unseasonably warm. And I told my wife I was going to go paddleboard. And so she said, fine. And I go down and I jump on my paddleboard and I'm paddling out. And right on the corner between the creek where I left and the river is this restaurant. And all these people were there because it was this beautiful spring day. And I go out there and I'm paddling, I'm looking at the water and I'm just moving that water. I feel like I'm just flying up the river. And I was just focused down on the water, just kind of unwinding. And I looked over and realized that after about 20, 25 minutes of paddling, I hadn't moved 10 feet up. I'd probably moved about 3 feet back. And I was suddenly painfully aware that there were people watching this guy out in the water paddling for 25 minutes and not making it a foot. And I went, I'm fighting it. I'm fighting the current. What would have happened if I just turned around and paddled with the current? I would have been way on downstream. And that's kind of the point when I went, what other laws do we violate in life that if we just went with the current, life would be a lot easier? So that's the reason the immutable laws are those natural laws that happen in our culture and in life that we can fight them. We just aren't going to make much headway.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, for those of you watching, if you want to learn more about Lee's work and get your copy of the Thrive Principles, then we've got a link for you. Just go to yourbrilliance.org/thrive. That's yourbrilliance.org/thrive. Well, thank you so much, Lee, for coming on and sharing this stuff with us. I wanted to know if there was any last message you'd like to leave our viewers with.
Yeah, that really the biggest thing is to say, don't defeat yourself. When something comes your way that's tough, don't say, man, this isn't fair, but to ask the question, what do I do now? How can I keep moving forward?
Fantastic. Don't paddle against the current.
Don't paddle against current. You'll lose. Trust me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you out there for watching. We appreciate your viewership and we hope to see you again soon. Until then, let your brilliance shine.